Hi everyone and welcome to this new video. In this video I want to talk about Emacs, and specifically in this video I want to start to do together the Emacs tutorial. So the default Emacs tutorial, the tutorial that is built in Emacs, we will start it in this video. I will go through the initial section of the tutorial and I will tell you what I think about it, how I think about Emacs and things related to Emacs. So this video and this series should be interesting for all of you who want to learn more about Emacs. If you want to support my work, you can subscribe to the channel, and I've also opened up a Patreon. There is a link in the description if you want to support my work. So that's it, enjoy the video. So how are we gonna do it? Well, the first things first is we're gonna start an instance of Emacs that is configuration free, so like that has no configuration. So we can do that with Emacs-Q. So this is gonna start a fresh version of Emacs. Then to access the tutorial, there are two different ways. Either from the navbar up the top, we go Help Emacs Tutorial. And then here we say resume your last saved tutorial, no. And here we are starting the tutorial in Emacs Tutorial. So this is the first way. Otherwise, there is the other way, which is by using the keybind Ctrl-H-T. So I press Ctrl H and then T, and then here it asks me once again, do you want to resume your last saved tutorial? I say no, and once again I'm in the tutorial. Now I'm gonna put this full screen. So I'm gonna put this full screen, and actually I'm gonna have to use this command log mode. So this command log mode, and I'm gonna start so that you can see the keybind that I use. So command log mode, and I'm gonna say open command log buffer. So here in the right, you can see the commands that I press during my walkthrough. I'm gonna disable my webcam so you can see it better. And now we can actually start to read the tutorial. So the most important thing to understand initially is how keybinds are written in Emacs. That is the notation that is used in Emacs to describe the various keybinds. And you can see it in here. So Emacs commands generally involve the control key, often labeled CTRL, or the meta key, usually labeled Alt. Rather than writing in full each time, we'll use the following abbreviation. So we have a C, dash, and then a character. This means hold the control key while typing the character here on the right. For example, CF means hold the control key and type F. And look at this. This is the function forward char. M instead is for the meta or alt key. So in the previous keyboards, historically this was the meta key, but right now in modern keyboards we'll actually find the alt key, but they mean the same. So M stands for alt, stands for meta, but right now it's alt. And basically we have the same approach. So we have the character, we have the modifier we can think of, and then the character itself. So, for example, if we want to quit the session, we can do Ctrl X and then Ctrl C. So in this case, when we have these two sequences of characters, the first one is you hold Control, you press X, then you let go Control, you hold it again and you press C. Now, if you want to quit a partially enter command, instead you can always press Ctrl G. And this is like one of the keybinds that you should learn immediately. If you forget something, just press Ctrl G. Like, for example, right now I'm gonna press Ctrl X, but not Ctrl C. So I'm just gonna press Ctrl X. And down below you can see this CX. Now I'm gonna press Ctrl G to quit the partially enter command, basically. So I can just say this, keyboard quit. Now, to stop the tutorial, you can do Ctrl X and then K, and then return. Because basically with this command, we are gonna kill the buffer. Now the buffer is a key aspect of Emacs, but we will talk about buffers and windows and frames in one of the next videos. For now, I just want to focus on the basic movement commands. So, in the tutorial, the characters, this kind of characters at the left margin indicate the directions for you to try using a command. So for example, if we see this, it means that now the tutorial wants us to press Ctrl V, which stands for View Next Screen, and it is used to scroll down in the tutorial. So basically it means that if you press Ctrl V, the page is going to scroll down. So the command itself is actually, funnily enough, called scroll up command, but what happens is that we scroll down the buffer. And of course we can also scroll up the buffer, but in this case, it is not Control V, it is Meta V, which means Alt V. So here I'm pressing Alt V and I'm going up. And you can see it in the navbar that here I'm going down, the navbar is moving down, here I'm going up, the navbar is moving up. So that's the idea. And so for now, we have this summary. So we have Control V to move forward one screen full, Alt V to move backward one screen full, and then we have Control L. So this Control L actually clears the screen and redisplays all the text, moving the text around the cursor so that the cursor is at the center of the screen. What does it mean? Let's say that I have the cursor. So the cursor is this black rectangular thing that is like pointing, right? That is lighting up on and off. And it represents the point where we're gonna write the character. Now, if I do Control L now, the buffer, the window is gonna move so that the cursor is at the center of the screen. So I do Control L, and now the window is at the center, like the cursor is at the center of the window, and the text moved to make sure this happened. So that's the idea. Now, let's talk about basic cursor control, which is one of the most important aspects that you must learn if you want to approach Emacs. So of course, moving from screen to screen can be useful, but we want to be able to move much more precisely within the same screen. That is, we want to move the cursor to reach different words and lines and things of the sort. Now, there are several ways in which you can move the cursor. You can use the arrow keys, for example. However, if you want to use Emacs, it's actually much more efficient to keep your hands in the standard position and use the following commands. Now, think about this. With the arrow keys, I can go arrow up and I move the cursor up. I can do arrow down and I move the cursor down. I can do arrow left to move the cursor left and right to move it right. So this is all straightforward. It's what we are used to. Now, Emacs actually encourages a different approach, because with Emacs, we don't want to move with arrows. We actually want to move with these other keybinds. So it is Control P for moving up, Control N for moving down, Control B for moving backward, and Control F for moving forward. So we have B and F to move within the same line, either backward or forwards, P and N to move between lines, so previous line or next line. Now, initially, these keybinds might seem weird. They might seem like, why in the hell should I learn about them? Basically, the idea is that if you use these keybinds, your hands are never gonna stay away from the touch typing position. That is, there will always be within the core of the keyboard, within the core section of the keyboard. If instead you use the arrow keys, this will create a distance between the arrow keys and the other keys in the keyboard, which means that when you want to write something, you will have to move your hand to the keys, you're gonna move your cursor, then you're gonna move your hand back, and then you're gonna write. Now, this might not seem like much, I understand. However, consider that if you work as a software engineer, if you work in cybersecurity, if you do any sort of work in which you have to interact with a digital system, with text files, and things of the sort, you will be very often required to edit these files, to move around files, to write new lines of code, to edit previous ones. You will be more often than not required to move around with the cursor and to write text. So you want to be extremely efficient in this simple task, because we will be doing it very, very often. And this is why I suggest you to take some time, do it slowly adjust to these keybinds. So basically that's the idea. Now, for example, move the cursor to the line in the middle of the diagram using Ctrl N or Ctrl P, then type Ctrl L to see the whole diagram centering the screen. So I'm gonna move it here, and I'm gonna say Ctrl L, and actually I'm already in the center, but let's say I was not. Let's say I was like this. I'm gonna move it like this, and then I am in the center. And here you can see the keybinds that I used. So Ctrl N to go down, Ctrl P to go up, Ctrl F to go forward, and Ctrl B to go backward within the same line. Now, you'll find it easy to remember these letters by the words they stand for. So P for previous line, N for next line, B for backward character, and F for forward character. You will be using these basic cursor position commands all the time, so you better learn about them. However, to be honest, I don't really suggest you to learn this kind of meaning because I never think about them. You just want to develop muscle memory on these keybinds. You just want to know, like, your hands have to move on their own. When we're talking about Emacs, this ability, the ability of muscle memory, is key because Emacs has a lot of functionality. Most of this is exposed through keybinds, so it has a lot of keybinds, which means that you're going to want to develop muscle memory so that you think less of it and your hands just go on their own. And once again, this thing might seem like a boring thing, I understand initially, but it is one of the fundamental aspects. It took me some years to actually properly understand why this was the case. Right now it's going to be about 8 to 9 years since I'm using Emacs. Initially, this thing really took a lot of time for me to learn, just do this kind of basic movement. So what I suggest is just use them first deliberately within the tutorial, then you can open a txt file and you can start writing some C code or some kind of general code using these keybinds. Yes, initially you will be slow, you will be extremely slow. However, over time, if you do it for weeks, you will actually learn the muscle memory required for you to be extremely fast. So in this kind of sense, there is an investment at the beginning, but it will pay off actually in the long run because it will be extremely efficient. So let's keep going. So each line ends with a new line, of course, which serves to separate it from the following line. And basically, if we, for example, do Ctrl B at the beginning of the line, we'll just go at the end of the previous line. Like, look at this. I am at the beginning of this line, I do Ctrl B, I get to the end of the previous line. And this also happens with Ctrl F. I do Ctrl F here, I'm gonna go at the beginning of the next line, at the beginning of the next line, and things like that. When you move past the top or bottom of the screen, the text beyond the edge shifts on the screen, of course. Like if I go up here, now at this point, if I go up further, the text is gonna shift and it's gonna leave me with more space up at the top. So this is like basic. Now, if moving by character is too slow, you can actually move by words. And to move by words, there are two keybinds that you want to really understand. And these are meta F and meta B. So what does it mean? It means that, for example, if I do meta F, so look at this, forward word here on the right, and I essentially moved to the end of the when word. If I do it again, as you can see, I'm skipping entire words. If I do MB, I'm doing the same thing but backward. So I'm skipping backward entire words. Why is this useful? Because, for example, let's consider the word white space. Suppose that I know I'm gonna have to skip it. Instead of pressing all the time Ctrl F, I can just press one time Alt F to go to the next word. So this is extremely powerful and it's once again something that you should learn. Also, notice the parallel between Ctrl F, Ctrl B and meta F, meta B. So basically the idea is that very often the meta characters are used for operations related to the units defined by the language. So for example, it could be words, sentences. So for units that are not atomic, while control characters operate on basic atomic units that are independent of what you are editing. We're talking about characters, we're talking about lines. That is, meta characters are defined by the semantics of the context, while control characters have a fixed meaning, we could say. Like no matter what kind of language, no matter what kind of text, you're always gonna have characters and lines. So basically that is the idea. And finally, the other thing, and here there is a summary, the final thing of interest are these other keybinds. So there is a keybind for moving at the beginning of the line and at the end of the line. So to move at the beginning of the line, we do Ctrl A. So look at this, move beginning of line. If we want to move at the end of the line, we do Ctrl E. And this is gonna move at the end of the line, move end of line. Now, so this is with control, right? With meta, it's actually a little bit different because we're gonna still move, but if you do MA, we're gonna move to the next sentence. Actually, move A is gonna move to the previous sentence. ME is gonna move to the next sentence. So here we have MA, backward sentence, ME, forward sentence. So it is similar. There is a similarity here. With Control E and A and E, we move between start and end of line, of a single line. With meta A and meta E, we move between sentences. So it is another way to quickly navigate a given text document. Now, the location of the cursor in the text is also called point. Now, what is the cursor? The cursor is this, in my case, this black rectangle that is like lighting up, right? It lights up and then it goes away, then it comes back. Now it's not lighting up again because I did not touch it. So basically that's the idea. So this location is also called the point. When I write something, for example, if I write A, here I'm moving the cursor to the right because I've inserted a character into the point. So I've written a character in the point and then the point moves to the right and so does the cursor. So to paraphrase, the cursor shows on the screen where point is located in the text, which is of course very useful to know. Information that is useful to know. So at this point, we have this summary of movement, which is key. Like the first thing you want to learn about Emacs is you really want to digest these simple commands. So move forward a character, backward a character, move to the next line and previous line, move forward a word, backward a word, move to the beginning of line, end of line, and move to the beginning of sentence, end of sentence. With respect to the programming context, actually, this last one is less needed because in programming we have less often the need for sentence. Instead, we can very much use the concept of character, the concept of word, and the concept of line. So we really must master those first keybinds. So what do I suggest? What I suggest is you start at the basic version of Emacs. Like this, without tutorial, without anything. Then you create a new file with Ctrl X, Ctrl F, and here you're gonna say hello.c, like a simple hello file. Let me delete this entire content actually. So let's start with a simple empty file. And then at this point, we're gonna slowly write a simple hello word. So we're gonna write the typical include std.h, then we're gonna write the main. And for example, in this case, the way I went backwards is I do Ctrl B. So you want to write a very simple document, like a very simple source code, but moving with Emacs keybinds. So I'm going to say printf. Then I'm going to move backwards of 2. I'm going to put the columns here. I'm going to move backward. Hello world. Let's say that I write this wrong. Like, I don't know, I just make some mistakes and this is not good, right? So I save this. Of course, this is not correct. I have to fix it. So how do I fix it? Well, I can go backward 2 lines with Ctrl N. I can go to the end of the line with Ctrl E. I can put the semicolon. I can move one word backward with MB. I can move 2 characters forward, remove the O, then move 1 word backward. Once again, I'm going to go 2 characters forward and fix the L. So basically that's the idea. Then I can go to the end of the line. I'm going to write return 0 and we are good to go. And then, for example, I can define a new function, sum with 2 arguments, and I'm just going to say return a plus b. Then I can define another function, multiply with 2 arguments, and I'm going to return a times b. So write simple code, but force yourself to use Emacs movement keybinds, even though initially they might seem weird. Now, of course, it is a choice you must make. However, I suggest to do that if you want to learn Emacs. So if you are not interested in Emacs, of course, you don't have to do it. However, if you are interested in truly learning Emacs, this is the first step that you must pass through. You must be used physically to the movement like Emacs wants you to. That's basically the idea. And we're mostly done with this first video. In this first video, I just wanted to give the importance of this moving the cursor within the buffer, because it is extremely foundational knowledge. Now, two other important cursor motion commands are the meta less than and the meta greater than, and they move the cursor at the beginning and at the end of the buffer. So with the meta less than, I'm moving at the beginning of the buffer. With the meta greater than, I'm moving it at the end of the buffer. So basically that is the idea. So let's go down. It was here. That's good. Now you can also move the cursor with the arrow keys, of course, if your terminal has arrow keys. However, even in the tutorial it says, we recommend learning Ctrl B, Ctrl F, Ctrl N, and Ctrl P for 3 reasons. First, they work on all kinds of terminals. I mean, this is like a problem that maybe they had at the beginning of Emacs, but now I don't think it's an issue that is too much valid. However, the other ones remain valid to this day. Second, once you gain practice at using Emacs, you will find that typing this control character is faster than typing the arrow keys. And this is faster because you do not have to move your hands away from the touch typing position. Your hands have to stay in roughly the same position at all time during programming. This is to increase the productivity. If instead you use arrow keys too often, you constantly have to move. Now, why do we want to be extremely efficient when it comes to key movement, hands movement, and things of the sort? Well, because programming is a hard thing anyways. However, you only want to be slowed down by your brain, not by your hands. The hands have to do a boring work after all. It's the mind that does the interesting work. And you want to make sure that what slows you down is your mind, not your hands. Your hands have to be fast, so that when you have an idea, you're going to implement it as soon as possible. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to program super fast, because you might be thinking about the problem, and that is good. However, we want to make sure that you do not waste time when your brain is not thinking. Once your brain has an idea, you want to implement it as soon as possible so that your brain can think of something else. You don't want your brain to be stuck on the same thing because your hands are slow. That's basically the idea. Third, once you form the habit of using these control characters commands, you can easily learn to use other advanced cursor motion commands as well. So basically, by learning this kind of thinking, this kind of philosophy, this kind of approach, you're also introduced to Emacs itself, so you can unlock Emacs' true potential. Now here there is a final section on the fact that most commands accept a numeric argument, and this can change the behavior of the command. For most of these, for example, consider this. We say Ctrl U 8, Ctrl F. It means execute the Ctrl F command 8 times. That is, move forward 8 characters. But sometimes it actually changes the nature, the semantic of the command. But this is really not that important. I mean, I wouldn't suggest you to spend too much time with numeric argument at first if you want to learn Emacs. Just focus on the basic cursor commands, which are found basically here. These ones. Focus on getting used to these ones. Now, to finish off, if Emacs stops responding. Now, if Emacs stops responding, you can easily stop it by just typing Ctrl G. So use Ctrl G as your safe fail, like in a way that whatever happens, you just spam Ctrl G and you hope that Emacs recovers. Most of the time it works, some of the time it doesn't, but you can always just rely on that. If you don't know what you did, if you made a mistake, always press Ctrl G. Like Ctrl G should be your best friend within Emacs. And the last thing, and then we quit, is disable commands. Sometimes commands are disabled so that beginners cannot use them by accident. And this applies to commands that are accessible through keybinds as well. For example, if you type Ctrl X, Ctrl L, like this, Ctrl X and then Ctrl L, it's gonna say you have typed a disable command. Do you actually want to use it? And I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no, and so like Emacs tries to guard from misusage when it comes to beginners, of course. But if you're really interested in that command, you can just learn about it and you can just execute it. So sometimes this can happen. Just know that it is because Emacs tries to protect you against yourself. And this is it for this first video. In the next videos, we will talk about other stuff such as Windows, Frame, more keybinds and things of the sort. Of course, there is a lot of content to be covered for Emacs. I want to make this series so that you see me using Emacs in pretty much every video. Some of you sometimes are interested, what kind of editor you use, how did you configure it, and things of the sort. Now, if you're interested in my configuration file, they're actually available under a Patreon subscription. But in general, if you're just interested in learning, the videos are for free. So once again, if you want to support me, Patreon down in the description. And in general, I thank you very much for watching the video and sharing them with like-minded people. So this is it for this video, and to the next video.